Hello and welcome to the Tennis Podcast. I'm Catherine Whitaker. This is Matt Roberts. This is David Law. You will notice our locations if you are joining us live on YouTube. We are in slightly unusual locations today. Mine is the least exotic of them all. I'm in my parents' dining room. So if you hear some faint dog barking in the background, it is Rosie and Billie Jean desperate to muscle in on the action. Matt is in his plain old usual living room with lovely soft furnishings. David, though, where are you, David?
Oh, I'm in actual New York City, the Big Apple, loving it. Jet lagged, don't care. Sunny outside, already been out for hours, and I've come back to do this live show, and then I'm off out again.
Where are you off out to later?
Don't know, wherever the city takes me. Never sleeps here, apparently, except I think my family might be.
I'm getting the sense that you're not in charge of the holiday agenda.
I have nothing to do with it whatsoever. Although I have to say, that is really enjoyable in itself. I'm not in charge. I'm also here for the first time. I first came here 21 years ago for the tennis tournament, and I've never been a tourist at all. And I'm having such a good time already because I'm just sort of wandering around with no time on me at all, apart from obviously needing to get back and talk to you guys, which is fine. But yeah, basically I've got a week of just doing this. It's awesome.
Fine is how David feels about being here tonight, everyone. I'm sure you all feel very loved and appreciated. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. It's exciting that David's in New York, because not only is David in New York, he's in the apartment that we're going to be staying in when the US Open is on. So it makes it all feel very real. Like I recognize that backdrop, and like we've got a fun week here planned, Catherine. We've got lots of good things happening over the next few days, but also excited to get out to New York.
Yeah, Matt and I are having a party at home this week while David's having a party in New York, and juggling it all, of course, with watching Karolina Pliskova against Victoria Tomova in Cincinnati, which is at the top of everybody's agenda at the moment. Of course, we're here on a Tuesday because the concession that tennis makes to the Olympics in its schedule is to move everything back by one day. So the finals in Canada took place yesterday on a Monday, and the Cincinnati finals will also be taking place next Monday. So our next live show, our next weekly show, which will also be live on YouTube, just like this one, will also be Tuesday. From that point onwards, normal service will resume. Just while we're on the subject of New York, which I think we will be rather a lot over the coming weeks, a week on Thursday, I can't believe how soon it's coming around, a week on Thursday, we will be live off Broadway. The Tennis Podcast is live in New York on Thursday, the 22nd of August. And that live show is supported by AO Travel and Experiences. So it'll be our first live show in New York to a live audience. Tickets sold out in a few hours, incredibly. First draft as that was like tickets have just about sold out, last few available. But no, tickets sold out in a few hours, incredibly. And to everybody that has got a ticket, we cannot wait to see you there. If you weren't able to get a ticket in person, you can get a ticket to stream the show online, produced by our hosts at the Green Space in New York. It's a really professional production. They've got like 6 cameras in there. There'll be someone producing and directing it. It's a whole thing that we're very excited about. So those virtual tickets are available to buy now. They're $10 each or $5 for friends of the Tennis Podcast. The link to buy them is available in our show notes or podcast description on the device that is currently playing this podcast. So a very big thank you to AO Travel and Experiences for supporting the live show and helping to make it happen, and helping to make everything that we will be doing at the US Open happen as well. Go to ausopentravel.com to book yourself a dream trip to the Australian Open. And just while I'm on the subject of New York and the US Open, one final important bit of business pertaining to Fan Week, David.
Oh, yes. Fan Week, where I will be next Monday, and I cannot wait.
6 days from now. Are the kids excited?
Yeah, I don't think they're quite as excited as I am. But then I know what it's like.
I guess they don't really have a reference point for it, right?
No.
They've got no idea what to expect at all.
No, I mean they've been to the Queen's tennis tournament in London. Now they'll be going to the tennis tournament in Queens, New York. But I mean, you know, they couldn't be more different. They've never been to Wimbledon. They've never been to hardly any tournaments really. Actually, they've been to Davis Cup, but I think the US Open will be right up their street. And you know, qualifying will be going on, practice, and you know, there's loads of stuff that they put on for Fan Week. So can't wait.
Yeah, August 19th, which is when David will be going. So if you go on Monday, August 19th, there's the chance of running into the laws as well. So bonus. It goes all the way through to August 25th. Grounds admission is free, but there are also exciting featured events with tickets for those starting at $30. You can see top players like Novak Djokovic, Venus Williams hit the court as stars of the Open, presented by Chase is back to benefit the USTA Foundation. You can also check out the US Open's premier food event, Flavors of the Open, presented by Dobel Tequila. And don't miss the newest events, US Open Mixed Madness, presented by IHG Hotels and Resorts, where top stars like Coco Gauff and Ben Shelton team up in a mixed doubles competition. For more info, visit usopen.org/Fan Week. Ben Shelton is on the Cincinnati Order of Play today, folks, playing actual real-life Riley Opelka. He's a tennis player again, folks.
I wonder if they'd ever come across each other before.
Probably not. I don't think their paths, they're professional. I mean, maybe socially, but I don't think they've ever been pro tennis players at the same time. Worlds colliding. Right, let's get into Toronto. Just before we do, if you are enjoying what you're watching, please hit like and subscribe. I've missed saying that. It's like Wimbledon all over again. Please do hit like and subscribe. So, moving on to Canada, let's start in Toronto, where Jessica Pegula defended her 1,000 title. She beat Amanda Anisimova, the backhand herself, 6-3, 2-6, 6-1 in the final. Anisimova was playing in her first WTA 1000 final ever. She beat Emma Navarro, Arina Sabalenka, and Daria Kasatkina along the way to get to that final. And Matt, presumably you were watching every single moment of that run on the edge of your seat.
Goes without saying, yes. This has been a really big week for Amanda Anisimova. She started her comeback from her mental health break from the sport back at the start of the year, and actually had quite a good run in Australia, where she got to the fourth round and lost to eventual champion Sabalenka, and you know, the signs were quite good, but she didn't play again until the clay, and it was tougher on the clay and the grass. She didn't win that many matches. She actually won 4 in Washington, including a couple in qualifying, and then this week she's won 5 in Canada all the way to the final. And it's just such a joy to see Amanda Anisimova playing well. You know, I think I obviously have a particular fondness for her game because of that backhand, but I think everyone generally can appreciate just the incredible clean ball striking and the fact that she was such a young talent breaking through at the same time as Coco Gauff, and she's very similar age to Iga Swiatek. You know, she's of that generation, and yet she hasn't been able to have the career that they've had for numerous reasons. Her father died when she was very young, and she's found being on tour incredibly difficult, and she's making this sort of journey back into the sport, and it was just fantastic to see her playing so well in Canada. And what I was impressed by was that she had to overcome quite a lot of adversity, and I mean that in the fact that she was suffering with blisters in her semi-final and final match, and also like it was really windy in Toronto, which I know is the same for everyone, but those are not conditions I would always associate with Anisimova playing all that well in that you've got to have really precise footwork normally, and that's not always an area of her game that is that good, to be honest. And yet she dealt with that all really well and played her wonderful brand of tennis and completely dismantled Arina Sabalenka, who she's now beaten a handful of times. She does quite like that matchup. She can turn Sabalenka's power back on her. Not a good performance from Sabalenka. I think maybe still some worries about her shoulder potentially as she comes back from injury. There's a lot of double faults, a lot of errors. Just generally, she didn't look quite right. But Anisimova was fantastic, and we can talk more about the final. But just a really, really positive week. By far her best run, certainly since the Roland Garros semis in 2019. Well, certainly since the Wimbledon quarters in 2022, and possibly even the Roland Garros semis in 2019. And yeah, I was really thrilled watching her with her new coach as well. And yeah, just some really good signs generally for her.
And a new coach that you've got no connection to whatsoever. You're having to start from scratch with this
Not
guy.
yet. Rick Vlieshauers, I'm coming for you. No, I'm not.
Sorry to do this question to you, Matt, but like, what does this mean? Because I've watched you go out to watch all of Amanda Anisimova's matches this year at Grand Slams, and obviously tune into all of her other matches at tour levels on the TV. And, you know, I've always wanted her to win, not quite as much as you, but I've always wished her well. You know, I love her backhand in a normal way. And, you know, I like her, and yeah, I wish her well. I generally do kind of want her to win, but it hadn't really occurred to me that it was ever going to amount to anything like this, quite honestly. And now that it has, you know, a quite significant run, I don't quite know what that means for her career and future. Like, did you think it was only a matter of time before something like this happened? And do you think it will continue happening? Not, you know, every week, but yeah, what do you think?
I think the most important thing for Anisimova was that she found a way to be comfortable with tour life again. And from what she's been saying this year, those signs were there. Like, I think she has been coping with tour life better and just enjoying it more. So that always gave me some hope, because kind of, as she says, and like, her tennis is always there. Like, she always knows that she can rock up on a tennis court and hit the ball well. Okay, she has to work a lot on her physicality and her movement and all that side of things, maybe the side of the sport that she doesn't like quite as much. But if those two things are there, like, she's always going to be a threat, because she does hit the ball so well and she can take the racket out of anyone's hand. But I didn't necessarily see this coming this week. I think we have to probably caveat our whole Canada discussion by the fact that it was definitely a weird tournament. You know, I think we found
it was a weird week, guys. We're about to talk about Alexei Popyrin becoming a Masters 1000 champion. Weird week,
right? Like, I think we can say it's a weird week, and yet these players can still take something from it. And like, she still had very legitimate wins. Like, okay, it wasn't peak Sabalenka, still Arina Sabalenka and Kasatkina and Emma Navarro, who's been playing well. Like, so there was definitely something that she can take from that. But we do, I think, as I say, have to just recognize that there were a lot of players missing, and also the transition from the Olympics on a physical level, going from clay to hard and Europe to the US, you know, that was all tough on the players. But also, I just think mentally and emotionally a lot went into the Olympics for these players. So look, I don't think Anisimova is going to suddenly be this really consistent force on the tour who's doing this all the time. She never has been. That's unlikely to now suddenly be her career path. But her ranking's back up again. She's up inside the top 50, I think, now, just. So she's going to be getting into these events. That was part of the problem over the clay and grass. She was having to play qualifying, and, you know, it's not easy. But a big breakthrough like this gets her into events, and like, I know the level is there that she can pop up and do this every now and again, as long as she feels sort of comfortable enough on the tour. But I'm really encouraged.
Just quickly before we move on to talk about the champion, Pegula, that Sabalenka match. Now, we've seen Anisimova beat Arina Sabalenka lots of times before. Sabalenka has an Anisimova problem, unquestionably. And one of my favourite things about tennis is quirky head-to-heads like that. But I was a bit shocked at how dumb a match it was from Sabalenka. Like, there is a clear play against Amanda Anisimova, and it is not just hitting hard into her hitting zone, because she can handle pace. What she can't handle is being pulled out of position. Like, there was no use of angle or width and seemingly no intent to do that. It didn't seem like a case of poor execution to me. It seemed like, what are you doing? And maybe she's frazzled. Maybe the fact that she's carrying this injury is just putting her in a dodgy headspace. I don't know. Do you cut her some slack for that performance, David? I don't know if you watched this. Feel free to weigh in if you did.
I saw quite a lot of it. Yeah, I saw quite a lot of it, and it actually felt like their other matches more, because I know Sabalenka did get a win over Anisimova quite recently, but that's more like peak Sabalenka and returning Anisimova. When they've played each other, for the most part, Anisimova has just dominated that head-to-head, and I do think that Sabalenka's view generally is, I can out-hit and I will out-hit anybody anytime. And the truth is, I think when she's playing her absolute best, she can do that to pretty much anybody. But you better get the ball away from Anisimova, because if you feed her power into her hitting zone, she has the sweetest backhand we've ever seen. And that was, and her forehand's not bad either. Just in terms of the purity of the ball strike, there aren't many coming close if it's right there where she wants it to be. I noticed, I watched the Jessica Pegula match just after I'd got here, and she was waxing on about the backhand of Anisimova in her on-court speech. She said, I'm jealous. I wish I'd got that. And obviously she won the title and she's got other things. And of course you're complimentary about your opponent, but that wasn't made up. Those weren't platitudes. This was somebody right at the top there who recognises somebody who could be all these things if life hadn't got in the way, and maybe they still will be incredible things, but it's a reminder of just how tough tennis is, I think, and you have a normal life behind it as well. And but no, it's great to see her back and showing what she can do.
Yeah, Jessica Pegula hypes up the Anisimova backhand like I do. I've seen videos of stuff like, build your perfect player, and she instantly goes to the Anisimova backhand. Like, she gets it, and I think that makes it a tough matchup for Anisimova. Like, Pegula's so aware of the threat, and what you were saying. By
stark contrast to Sabalenka match, she played a really smart match, didn't she, Pegula?
Exactly. Like, she really did play the angles well. Like, that was really notable how well she was pushing Anisimova off the court. Look, first set, Anisimova had an absolutely horrible returning day. Like, she barely made a return, and Pegula was just easing through service games, and Anisimova wasn't able to apply any pressure whatsoever. There was a moment where it really looked like, oh my God, I never want to speak of this match again. It looked like it was going to be an absolute disaster with Anisimova a set down and love 40 down, and it looked like it was...
Shall I text Matt, see if he's okay? No, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I'll leave him be.
But then Anisimova did find her game and started middling the ball and ran through the second set quite quickly. But then I was really impressed with the smart set that Pegula played in that final set. Look, again, Anisimova's level dropped off. It wasn't one where they played well at the same time, really, but Pegula was hitting great shots on the run and was using the angles, and yeah, she was absolutely fantastic. And she's the first woman to defend Toronto since Martina Hingis. Sorry, defend Canada since Martina Hingis in 2000. I think it's a really hard thing to do. Clearly no one's done it in 24 years, but like having to defend the title in a different place with the fact that they switched between Toronto and Montreal, like, okay, the conditions are similar, but a little bit different. And yeah, I think it's really, really impressive from Pegula, and kind of needed as well. She hasn't had her best year. She was down at 20 in the race, and she's up to 11 now, so puts herself right back in the conversation to make the WTA finals. And yeah, like she was impressive. It wasn't like the toughest route through because of what I said before about the players missing, but Diana Schneider's a very good win in 2024, and then Anisimova, who was playing really well as well. So yeah, props to Pegula. She was the better player in the final.
Schneider was the one that took out Coco Gauff. This was an American-dominated tournament. There were Americans everywhere you looked in this draw, right into the latter stages, and Coco Gauff wasn't one of them. And I don't really know what to read into that, because I really felt like she should have been. But then, there are really valid caveats here. She was turning around after the Olympics, which would have been a big upheaval emotionally and physically and logistically. And Diana Schneider is bloody good. Nobody's tooting that horn harder than me. But I also am just a bit worried about Coco Gauff. I don't know. Where do you come down on this, Matt?
I think you should be. By the way,
yeah,
I do. Listen, she's still got plenty of time to turn this around, but she hasn't had great results recently. Not really. And let's not forget, last year she turned it around quickly after a very disappointing Wimbledon loss. I know there's less time here, and it's another surface change, etc. But yeah, this isn't just she got beaten. I mean, she got beaten by a very good player, yes, but she got absolutely hammered. I mean, 6-4, 6-1. That's not a good scoreline at all. And I think that there is a lot of work to do for Coco Gauff to feel confident. This isn't. She kind of reset, didn't she, a year ago, and won a tournament, and then won another one, and then she goes to the US Open, and it's all upside, really. It all felt like it was good news, and right now it all feels a bit stressful, to be honest. She didn't deliver at the Olympics at all, and here we are now. She's defending, and that's a different mentality.
Who's going to have a better US Open, Gauff or Pegula?
That's a good question.
Good question.
I think it might be Pegula.
David, you never back Pegula.
Well, I've never had much reason to, have I? Let's be honest. She just keeps on bombing out in quarterfinals. We had a chat about it a couple of days ago. You said, "Are we going to get a weird US Open?" And I know that the last time we had that sort of conversation was ahead of the French Open, wasn't it? And it ended up being anything but weird for most of it. But then I suppose it did get weird with Novak Djokovic getting injured and things like that. But I do think it's going to be a bit weird. So maybe this is Jessica Pegula's opportunity.
Well, the thing is, Pegula has got that quarterfinal block, hasn't she? That is going to be a big hurdle for her to overcome. But I think that probably is kind of the story of this like post-Wimbledon period. Like we have been talking all year about this solid group of top WTA players that there are right now. It feels like there's question marks against kind of all of them at the moment that we are traditionally putting in that group. Like, okay, Świątek I still think is the US Open favourite, and we haven't seen her play since the Olympics, but there is that question mark of how she will bounce back from the Olympics. Rybakina, so many just health issues at the moment, and hopefully we're going to see her in Cincinnati, but there's a question mark there. Sabalenka, the game hasn't looked good, and then Coco Gauff, she's lost her last 4 matches against players ranked in the top 50. Like she's been getting wins against players who she absolutely should be beating, and as soon as she's put under a little bit more pressure, she's losing, and her game is breaking down a bit, and it's been like that for a few weeks now. I do think sometimes players get to a place where they've had success before, and the good feelings can come back, and that crowd can help Coco Gauff in New York, and she's just so tough to actually put away and beat that I think she could get through the first week with kind of her legs and her athleticism and her defense and the crowd behind her, and I think she could build. So I would probably still back Gauff in New York, but it's tough to say that you're like predicting her to defend her title right now, just because of the state of her game. But I think she can make a better showing of it than she has done in the past few tournaments.
Okay. So moving from Toronto on to Montreal, where, as I hinted at earlier, Alexei Popyrin won the biggest title of his career by some distance, beating Andrei Rublev 6-2, 6-4 in the final. He also beat best player in the world Thomas Mahatch, Ben Shelton, Grigor Dimitrov, Hubert Hurkacz, Sebastian Korda, who'd been on a heck of a run, had Korda kind of made himself the man to beat in that mini little couple of week Olympic-y period. Rublev, of course, having beat Yannick Sinner in the quarterfinals. We'll talk about Sinner and that kind of angle on it all in a minute. I mean, I just want to defend my comment about this result being weird to anybody in the chat that thinks this isn't weird. Like, Alexei Popyrin, okay, had won 2 titles before this, both ATP 250s in pretty limited fields, in Singapore in 2021 and in Umag last year. Good tournaments, both of them, great performances. Extremely different kettle of fish to this. He's 25. He's been around a long time. We know who Alexei Popyrin is. He's never been he's had fluctuations in his rankings. He's never been inside the world's top 35. He spent a lot of time ranked around 70 and 80 in the world in his career. Yes, he has had moments where he's really looked like he can play with the big boys for a match or two. You know, David, you picked him being a test for Novak Djokovic at the Australian Open this year. He had that big win over Taylor Fritz at the Australian Open last year, I think it was. He has had moments, but he's never shown any signs of stringing it together at this big a tournament against, okay, we're not talking about Alcaraz or Djokovic here, because for a 1,000, given the Olympics, it was a slightly depleted field. But this is a massive outlier of a result for Alexei Popyrin, and he now has as many Masters 1000 titles as Dominic Thiem. It's wild. It's really wild.
And look, I do feel that there is that asterisk against this particular tournament in a way that there just isn't against any other big Masters 1000 event, because you only have the Olympics every 4 years, and it has been really compromised by it. That having been said, and I do agree with you that Alexei Popyrin has not done this to date, and therefore this is a surprise. I would also say this is what should have been happening already with this guy. I feel like I've backed him to do things that he hasn't done in the past, in the last year or two. I remember the Davis Cup late last year and stuff like that. He's got a huge game. I mean, his serve, he's 6'5", he's got a huge serve, he moves well for a guy of his size, he's got a massive forehand, and I just think he's really dangerous, and I just think he should be hurting more people more often and making more waves in his career. And I remember when he won Umag last year, I watched that final, and Stan Wawrinka was desperate for that title, and Popyrin just didn't let him have it. And it was quite an emotional ceremony afterwards where Popyrin just revealed to Stan Wawrinka that he'd idolised him for years, and he couldn't believe that here he was on the court with him. And I just thought, I really like the way this guy comes across, and he's got a pretty high-profile coaching setup, one of which is Xavier Malisse, a former semi-finalist at Wimbledon. And I just have kept thinking, well, why does this guy who seems so dangerous not translate it into us talking about him all the time because he's unavoidable? And the truth is he's not unavoidable enough. He's avoidable. I think, I mean, when he won this title, I mean, I realised, geez, I don't know that much about him, but I remembered that Pat Cash worked with him for a short period. So I messaged Pat this morning and just asked him about him, and he said that he'd worked with him for 6 weeks when Popyrin qualified for Wimbledon, and you know, it was sort of coinciding with that. So he was able to help him with that side of his game, And he said, really I was brought in to kind of restructure and reconstruct his game a bit technically and to work some things out. And he said you mentioned his age, 25. It finally seems to have, he's got his identity as a player. He's got a massive serve and he's got a big forehand, and he's got to be dominating, if not with the serve, then with the forehand straight after it. And that's his game. And there were a couple of points where he went for broke against Rublev, and he made Rublev's forehand look puny by comparison. Just the sheer violence with which he can hit the thing and how he can sort of open his body up. He's got a very loose arm and a loose body in terms of getting everything going into it. And Pat said his backhand is always going to be that shot that he has to kind of keep working at and protecting. But he's getting there. He's getting there with who he is as a player, and this is not totally isolated. I mean, it is in terms of winning a title at this level, but he's been having some significant runs and results all year. He's at the highest he's been. So I just look at him and I think, well, why not? Why wouldn't you be doing this? And finally he is. Now the next thing is, can he do it in tournaments where everybody's there? Because he may well run into bigger names earlier on. But I mean, this was a good run in itself. There were a lot of big names that he went through. I mean, certainly very decent players. There were no duffers in his route to this title at all.
And I think what most impressed me about the group of players that Popyrin beat was that the majority of them did not go to the Olympics. So they were actually sort of targeting this period of the season, Shelton and Korda and Dimitrov and Rublev. And Hurkacz didn't either, but that was because of injury. So I think Hurkacz is still coming back and maybe wasn't quite at full pelt. But
I mean, Hurkacz was supposed to be out until 2025. He's put a pair of tights on and miraculously is fit to play, sort of.
Yeah, apparently there's some sort of arms race on the ATP tour. Who can have the most miraculous recovery from an injury going on right now? And Hurkacz is currently making his case. But there was 5 top 20 players that Popyrin beat, and as I said, all of them sort of primed for this hard court period of the season. Whereas Popyrin was at the Olympics and did make that trip over. So I think that's an incredible turnaround. I think when I've watched Popyrin in the past, I've often thought he gets very tight, and I think that was a big difference this week as well, because he was down in a lot of these matches, and yet he came up with the goods. He saved match point against Dimitrov, I think multiple match points actually, and he was 3-4 love 40 down in the third set against Hurkacz and suddenly stepped it up, and it did seem like he was playing better in big moments. And I think we maybe saw a little sign of that at the back end of last year. David mentioned the Davis Cup, and I remember being in Malaga when Leighton Hewitt drafted him into the team quite late. I think Kokkinakis was meant to play but had a bit of an injury, so Popyrin came into the squad, but actually Hewitt then put him in the team, like in the actual lineup, and it was a little show of faith, I think, that Hewitt had seen something that, okay, they've got de Minaur, he's going to be their number one, but just to get in above like Jordan Thompson, who'd kind of been his reliable guy in the past, he went with Popyrin, and so I think kind of the signs were there from Hewitt's point of view last year, and yeah, it's all come together in this incredible week, and this will get him seeded at slams now. He's taking a massive ranking jump, so that's a significant thing. I must say though, when I was watching this run and saw Popyrin win the title, my first thought was presumably Andy Murray is thinking, oh my God, I retired too soon. I beat this guy.
Honestly,
Queens.
Has there ever been a steeper trajectory than being the last ever victim of the remains of Andy Murray to Masters 1000 champion in 2 months?
Literally.
I think Goran Ivanisevic might say that when he lost to Christian
He lost
Karate,
to Andy Murray, David. He lost to
Goran
2024
won Wimbledon
Andy
after
Murray.
losing to Christian Karate, who was undefeated in the world. And I actually brought him up in conversation to Goran the other week, and he still talks about it all the time.
Absolutely crazy. And like, I think of Popyrin as somebody that should be decent on grass. I know that's probably a bit lazy, you know, big serve and everything, but he's got. I did notice in the match yesterday, and I do think this is an effective weapon against Andrei Rublev. He's got a nice slice backhand, Alexei Popyrin, nicer than I had previously given him credit for. I think
he's a good watch, you know. I
Yeah.
actually really quite. I mean, I mentioned that when I thought he might cause Djokovic problems at the Australian Open, I just feel like he matches up well against everybody to be a bit of a nightmare. And there's not that many that you could say that about.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrei Rublev, I saw some clips from him in press conferences where he talked about the mental health struggles that he's had this year, periods of depression. Yeah, I actually thought he articulated, given, you know, second language, second language and just generally being a young male athlete, which doesn't necessarily always go hand in hand with, you know, expressing emotions or processing emotions really well, although that does seem to be changing. He talked about how, you know, he's had intense periods of depression and how he would be absolutely fine off the court, but all the emotion would come out on the court. It's like that was the outlet. The more he kind of repressed it in life, the more it seeped out onto the tennis court. It's like that was his sewage pipe, if you will. And I thought that was really, you know, that's really good. I don't know whether he's seen a therapist or something, but that's good self-analytics emotionally there. And I'm not saying, you know, he's suddenly cured and we're never going to see an uncomfortable outburst from him again, but I thought that was encouraging, hearing him talk like that, David.
Yeah, that is to me, and that's just. It does sound like he's certainly spoken to somebody who's helped him understand things maybe a little bit more. What I did like, as hard as it was to watch that most recent outburst when he just was repeatedly smashing himself in the leg with his racket, was how disgusted he was with himself afterwards, and how it felt like he'd kind of hit rock bottom with it emotionally and mentally. He looked ashamed of it. He looked really, really embarrassed, and I'm glad. I mean, I feel for him. I've never not felt for him, because clearly he's going through a horrible time when he's experiencing these moments. But this actually made me wonder whether he might be able to do something about it. So I wish him well. And look, another good run for him. You know, this has pretty much come from nowhere for him, hasn't it? Given the form he's been in of late. So well done to him.
That's it. Like his profile as a player has kind of changed a bit this year. Like he used to be super consistent, you know, constantly getting to the latter stages of tournaments, not suffering bad losses, but, you know, you wouldn't necessarily back him to have the big wins. Well, he's actually the only guy this year to have beaten Alcaraz and Sinner, and he's won a title in Madrid and he's reached the final here in Canada. Okay, like both tournaments maybe didn't have the absolute strongest fields, but he had to go through Alcaraz and Sinner to get to where he did, and it's just he's found the consistency really hard this year. But like Rublev reaching the final of Masters 1000 events feels like something that Rublev's should be doing, but he actually hasn't done all that much of it. So for him to do it twice this year is in a year that's been really tough for him is kind of hard to get your head around, but also really impressive. It just makes you like, I feel like Rublev used to be a really easy guy to predict, whereas now to me he's become really, really hard to predict. Another one who is hard to predict.
Has everybody seen it came out a few weeks ago now, has everyone seen the ATP social video of Rublev and Medvedev? It's supposed to be a jaunty little, you know, bromancy piece, and they're asked, what's your wish for one another? And Medvedev very poignantly says, I just want Andre to be happy. And it's like, it's sort of too sad and profound you sort of want to hear the jaunty music fade out for some strings or something. It was sort of beautiful, but heart-wrenching all at the same time. We're all pretty worried about Yannick Sinner. right? The hip situation it's a worry.
I mean, he didn't sound that worried. He put it in terms of it sort of flared up because he hadn't been able to do that much physical work because he'd been ill. He'd had to miss the Olympics because he was ill, and then he's back on a hard court, and it sort of flared up. He says he doesn't think he'll necessarily be at his best in Cincinnati, but he is very much targeting New York and thinks he'll be okay there. I guess, like, just big picture, I'm a little bit more worried about the fact that, well, we've said it all year, repeatedly he's getting these little, well, maybe not little, quite significant physical issues that seem to be costing him matches and tournaments. Look, he's had an amazing year. He's reached the quarterfinals of every single tournament he's played. He's won some, he's broken through. Like, he's a slam titleist now. He's the world number one. Like, so I suppose in that sense, big picture, I'm not that worried. But like, this is a common occurrence. That it was the hip earlier in the year, it's the hip again. There've been some cramping issues. Like, I think that's a side of his game that maybe hasn't quite caught up to how good, like, the rest of his game has got. I still think there's probably quite a lot of physical work that he needs to do, you know, given that record he's got on not winning a match over 4 hours, things like that. Like, his body is slightly breaking down, and that is a bit of a worry. But I also just back Sinner and the people he has around him that I think they will do that work, if it is work that needs doing, unless it's something much more concerning and something sort of chronic. I don't think we're quite there yet, but like, it's a concern. But I just think Sinner's so good at making kind of the right decisions for his career. I think he'll get it. I think he'll get it right. But yeah, like, we definitely have to factor it in going into the US Open that Sinner doesn't feel quite physically that strong right now, especially in New York, those conditions and 5 sets.
Well, actually, that is one thing I would say about that as well. I know that there is a concern about the hip, and you're right, Catherine. When I saw the video clips, I didn't see the whole match, but when I saw the clips of him trying to manipulate his hip and turn himself and raise his leg as if it was a problem, and he was referencing to his coach that there's an issue and so forth. You never see Darren Cahill stand up and say, well, if it's a real problem, go and stop. You always see him stand up saying, come on, mate, come on, kind of suck it up and get on with it. I get a lot of that from Darren Cahill's body language out there. And when I look at the last 18 months, I think we see that a lot from Darren Cahill. I think he feels that, and listen, maybe there's a serious problem there that is a concern, and I'm not trying to suggest that there isn't, and I'm not suggesting that Sinner's making it up, but I think he feels a lot out there. He cramps a lot. He's often looking like there's something wrong, and I get the sense that Cahill's just trying to stop him thinking about those things and get on with it. So yeah, and I am interested that Sinner hasn't made a big thing of it afterwards as well. So hopefully it is just one of those surface change things. Andy Murray often used to have that, didn't he? If he would change services, I mean, a lot earlier in his career, not since he's been having all the major issues. You know, he was always one with certain knee joint issues and things like that. I think he got a congenital condition, hadn't he? So hopefully these things can be managed and just loosened up for him to be properly competitive.
In hard-hitting journalism news, there were reports this week that Sinner-Skyer might have broken up. I'm here to tell you that Matt and I are keeping a close eye on the situation. They do still follow one another on Instagram, despite reports to the contrary.
That was the sole piece of evidence suggesting that they might have broken up.
Now, they have got a bit less diligent with liking one another's posts, I would say, but they might just have, transitioned out of the honeymoon phase of they might just be feeling really secure and not needing to do that. I don't know. Just letting our listeners know that we are across the situation and doing hard-hitting journalism on your behalf. And checking daily whether they still follow one another. You're welcome. David's on the edge of his seat for our updates.
I do sort of wonder, how do you get into that situation? How do you get out of it? That kind of, I've liked yours, but you haven't liked my post. I mean, maybe you just need to say, listen, just so that we're clear, I'm not going to be liking all of your posts, right? So don't take it in a bad way if I happen to not. You do what you like.
Well, yeah,
I think the bigger issue is how do you get out of a relationship?
Interpret it.
How do you get out of a relationship on tour? I'm always mind-boggled about that. I mean, how can that not be messy? You can't ghost someone if you're seeing them in the locker room, can you?
Is this all just a big segue to the Stefanos Tsitsipas section of the pod?
Well, Matt, thank you very much for that. We move on to the other big breakup of the week, or rather the only big breakup of the week. And this one really is confirmed by the man himself. In fact, all from the man himself. There was video footage of Stefanos Tsitsipas last week in Montreal following his defeat to Kei Nishikori in the year 2024. I mean, look, fantastic win for Kei Nishikori, but not the sort of results that Stefanos Tsitsipas is aiming to be having. A mixed zone interview with him straight off the court where he blames his dad, basically. And he's asked you, is that a coaching situation you're going to look at then? And he goes, yeah, maybe. And then a couple of days later, the following statement comes out on social media from Stefanos Tsitsipas. This is translated from Greek. He says, "It is with a heavy heart that I inform you that my collaboration with my father as a coach has come to an end. I prefer to keep my father in his role as a father and only as a father." Brace yourself, folks. Philosophy teaches us that wisdom comes through understanding our limits and acknowledging our mistakes. In my case, I realized that I was wrong to talk to my father the way I did. Tennis is not just a match, a hit, or a performance of a few seconds. It is a long journey full of emotions, pressure, and expectations. In that moment of frustration, there were many mistakes and errors on the part of my coach and father. As an introvert, I tend to hold in my emotions and build them up until I reach a bursting point. I consider myself patient, so the fact that I reacted this way left me shocked. My behavior on the court was unacceptable, and I feel disappointed that I got to a point where I showed a dark side of myself. When I feel disrespected, judged, or emotionally attacked, I tend to lose control. Women, if you hear that, well, women or men, if any man ever says that to you, just note it down as a red flag. I tend to lose control of what comes out of my mouth, which goes against my values as a human being. I lost control and could not see clearly in front of me. My father has been trying for the last few years to train me, raise me the right way, and provide me with knowledge and wisdom, both on and off the field. I thank him for that. I thank him for the sacrifices, pain, and suffering he has to endure to make this endeavor a success. From now on, his role will remain within the confines of the father role, and that alone. My father will continue to travel with me and be there to support me and provide assistance off the field, as I have always wanted. I trusted my father with the coaching role for so many years. I'm not sure who'll take his place. I'm not in a position to decide yet. What I do know is that it is time to let this chapter and this phase close and try to write a new one. We've both agreed to that, and I hope to focus on our human side first, then the rest. Have to admit, I'd forgotten how long that was when I embarked upon reading it, and I didn't realise there was. I scrolled down and realised there was several more paragraphs to go. But anyway, I started, so I finished. And for me, the key line in that is my father's going to continue to travel with me, thus mitigating any benefits that there might be of changing the situation. I think while his father continues to travel with him and is there, it is going to be impossible for any other coach to come in and have a meaningful impact. And I think Apostolos needs to step aside and say, this isn't about me. I know Tsitsipas is saying this is what I want, but Apostolos needs to say, no, for your own sake, I need to step aside here and let you let you be you and figure this out on your own. I'll always be here to support you as your father, but that doesn't mean being here to mop your brow off the practice court or whatever it is you might be doing. That's my feeling about it. I mean, I have lots of other feelings about it. It just sounds tremendously messy.
Yeah, because I mean, look, if this was certain other coaches or fathers, maybe there are modes. Maybe there's a mode that you can be off and a mode that you can be on. But he can't stop talking. It's a running joke how he just can't stop talking, and everybody knows it, and Tsitsipas knows it. So he's not going to stop, I don't think. And so what's to be gained, really, from saying he's no longer your coach if he's travelling with you all the time? I don't know. I mean, look, the tour is tough. We've talked about that. It's not easy to travel on the tour, but come on. There's got to be another way now. If this is really what you want, or is it actually, are you just sort of saying that for another reason? I don't know. But it doesn't make me feel that he's just made a big decision that is going to transform his professional world. Stefanos Tsitsipas, no.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see like what it practically looks like. Like, will Apostolos be in the box during matches, or will he not even be there? Like, is he going to travel but not sit in the box like that? I suspect he will be there. Like, so how does he fight that instinct to not, as David says, constantly talk? I think Tsitsipas has got the Greek Davis Cup captain and the Olympic tennis guy with him this week in Cincinnati as sort of helping out as I guess the coach. But like this is more substantial and sort of consequential, I think, than what Tsitsipas did last year, which was when he said that his father was taking a break from being his coach, and he had Mark Philippoussis in there as well. But I think Mark Philippoussis found coming into that environment pretty tough to be in, and I don't see how this is going to be different for a new coach, just because they're not sharing the role with the father. Like, if the father's still there, he's going to be having an impact. His voice is going to be heard. Okay, maybe not on the match court, but he's going to be there. He's going to be a presence. And yeah, I agree. Like, as long as that element's still there and he's traveling, I don't really see how this is the significant change that probably needs to happen.
In Cincinnati this week, which is very much already underway, Djokovic isn't playing. Alcaraz is. He's back. He could have to play Alexei Popyrin in his first match, incredibly. In terms of the women's tournament, Naomi Osaka lost in qualifying to Ashlyn Kruger. And then she put up a very interesting post on her Instagram a short while ago, a long notes post. And I panicked when I saw it. I thought, oh my God, is this some sort of retirement post or something dramatic? But no, it was just a kind of, hey, this is where I'm at post. And she talked about not feeling in her body in a way that she could only compare with how she felt immediately postpartum after giving birth to her daughter, which I found very interesting. And she said, I don't have any answers to it other than just to keep working. And I know it's a very tennis playery or athlete-y thing to say, enjoy the process, trust the process not outcome. But it is good to hear Naomi Osaka talking that way, because I don't think she has always enjoyed the process. So to hear her say, I'm leaning into enjoying the process and trying not to get hung up on the outcomes, because in her own words, the results aren't resulting right now. I think that is overall good, but I do want the results to start resulting. I don't want to be watching her losing qualifying to Ashlyn Kruger all that much. Like, she's too good to be suffering results like that. And I did think it would be clicking more than it has. by now. I did.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, if somebody had told me when she came back that she would seem to be as committed as she is and seemingly in quite a good place to continue being committed, and to have had one moment where we all got very, very excited in that match against Iga Swiatek, and really not a lot else, and really no results on hard courts, I'd have been amazed at the start of the year. You know, I remember one. I don't know whether it was a Friends Q&A show. We were talking about how many Grand Slams is Naomi Osaka going to win now that she's come back. And I mean, I said one, I think. But I remember thinking, but if she really gets going, that she could start reeling them off, because I think her at the top of the list and Andreescu a little bit lower down, they just feel like Grand Slam champions who can just turn it on, or who will find their sweet spot and then it'll all just start happening. But it's not that simple, is it?
No, apparently not. It's a strong old field in Cincinnati this week, isn't it? Swiatek's back, Jung Chin-wen, Jasmine Paolini, Donna Vekic. She's playing right now, Matt?
Yes, playing the aforementioned Ashlyn Kruger, in fact, and not finding things easy. She's been a breakdown. She's back on serve, but facing break point. Pam is there.
Maybe Ashlyn Kruger will win the title, and I'll have to take back all of my Osaka takes about what a disaster of a result that is for her. Rybakina is back as well, whatever that means. No Danielle Collins, no Ons Jabeur, no Barbora Krejcikova, and no Maria Sakkari. So it's a decent field, but there are some omissions in Cincinnati. Jabeur's having a tough time, isn't she? Just cannot get going. Yeah,
shoulder injury she cited this time.
Just feels like if it's not one thing, it's the next thing, isn't it? I know there's still a lot more business to be done in terms of lead-up tournaments and everything, but do you think we're in for a wild US Open on either the men's, women's side or both?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I really do. I mean, the Olympics...
How wild?
I'd actually quite like to... I've never done this. I'd quite like to go back and have a look at some US Opens after Olympic tournaments to find out what happened.
I was thinking about that, though, and certainly on the men's side, it hasn't affected the last few US Opens in Olympic years, really. But then, we were in a generation where they were never affected by anything, were they? They just sort of won everything. I suppose it'd be interesting if you go further back.
Olympics. Did Stan win a US Open after Olympics?
Yeah, but it's not wild, is it? Wawrinka winning a third slam and
Djokovic in the final. If the fifth ranked player if Medvedev won, I wouldn't say it was wild US Open. I think would have to be someone. I mean,
who hasn't won slams
the US
before.
Open 2021 was maybe a bit wild
on the women's side.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, on the women's side for sure.
Qualifier, won it.
I think we could be in for a wild women's US Open.
Not men's.
As David pointed out earlier, we were there earlier in the year, and all those guys showed up and got to the business end. And there's kind of fewer doubts about them now, I would say.
I'm not going to say that Novak Djokovic isn't in the mix again. Put it that way. But I am sort of curious to know, he's just going to come in not having played at all, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, but how great is he going to be feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm worried about Sinner. I'm worried about that hip. It sounds sort of chronic, the hip. Sounds like he's just sort of managing a low-key chronic injury, which I don't love. I don't love the sound of that. I'm a bit worried about him. But
do you think that there's been a link by the fact that it's flared up when he hasn't played?
Like that used to be the case with Nadal's foot, didn't it?
Right.
And that's why it was so bad after COVID. Yeah, I mean that is interesting, and can be the case with chronic things like movement. Movement can help. I don't know. Look, I'm speaking beyond my medical and knowledge of Jannik Sinner's anatomy brief, but it is a area of concern for me. Both his hip and his relationship status with Anna Kalinskaya. I will keep an eye on both for the sake of the podcast and its listeners. You are welcome, folks. I'd like to say hello to our mascot for this episode. It's a familiar face. Or it certainly is to me, because I have the faces of all our mascots etched into my brain. It is lovely Cooper. Cooper is back for another year. 15-year-old beagle, or around 15. Cooper was a stray, so owner Rob isn't precisely sure how old Cooper is. He was adopted as a stray in New York City, moved with them to Milan in Italy after that, lived in Ferney-Voltaire in France, Geneva, Switzerland for a period, traveled to almost 20 countries, moved back to the States, and currently in Durham, North Carolina, but they're moving back to New York City in June. We officially think that Cooper is our most well-traveled ever mascot. If anyone thinks I'm wrong about that and would like to take me up on it, then feel free to write in, but I think Cooper takes the biscuit. His only interests these days are eating and being old. Fair enough, Cooper, I reckon. Good luck to you. He's lovely. I'm going to put a picture of him on our Instagram, and there'll be a picture of him in our newsletter as well. Thank you, Cooper, for coming back for more mascot fun. We love that. Hello to our mascots, the dearly departed Darwin, Francis, Hyder and Soma, Billie Jean King and Alana Kloss, sponsors, of course, of Billie Jean, who hasn't been pawing at the door to be let in, astonishingly. Hello to our top folks and executive producers, Greg, Chris, Jamie, and Jeff. And Matt, let's have some shout outs.
We have Catherine Willerton.
Oh, Catherine.
Hello, Catherine.
Same church, same pew.
And a Catherine W. Wow. Love that. What else do we know about Catherine?
She's from Merseyside and a long-time listener of the pod.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. So we're talking
Thanks, Catherine.
C and an INE. Briefly forgot how to spell my name there, which is a worrying moment. Catherine, you've got an excellent name. Thank you very much.
And you're going to like the next name as well, because we have Nina.
Oh, what a set of shout-outs.
And Nina writes, as in Nina Stojanovic of potentially losing out on Olympic bronze because of Novak Djokovic fame, and as in Nina, Catherine's niece.
Oh, I saw Nina
nice.
today. She was on great form. Oh, it's great that Nina Stojanovic isn't the first Nina that I think of when I hear the name Nina anymore. I've got nothing against Nina Stojanovic, but there's a new Nina in town now for me. And another new one now. Thank you, Nina. Do we know anything else about Nina?
Nina is from the Netherlands, but currently living in California by way of France and Japan.
Wow.
And her Grand Slam champion wish list is Ons Jabeur and Karolina Muchova.
Yeah. I'm with you, Nina.
Is that ever going to happen?
Also,
guys?
France, Japan, and California is the three past, present, and future Olympic host cities.
Yes. Very good.
Thank you, Nina.
Are either of them ever going to win a Grand Slam?
No.
Don't think so.
No. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you, Nina.
And finally, we have Peter Swenson in Corvallis, Oregon.
All right, Peter.
Hello, Peter.
Like the great Peter McNamara.
Yes, and Peter Sampras. I assume he's a Peter.
It was when it came out of Greg Rosetsky's mouth. That's what he used to call him to his face. That didn't go down
I have
very
actually
well.
seen that happen in the flesh. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I've seen it go down badly in the flesh.
You've
as
never
well.
seen
Yeah.
anybody bristle like Sampras would.
What else do we know about Peter in Oregon?
What else do we know? That he grew up in Pennsylvania, in fact, and his
Key swing
dad's-
state.
Yes, his dad used to run a tennis ladder, so one of those excellent people that organises tennis events for people to play in.
I believe the capital of Oregon is Salem. And I've always wondered if that's Salem of witch trials fame. Peter, let us know.
Or we could Google it.
You could just look it up.
Yeah.
If you've always wondered, I'm surprised you one day haven't had the urge.
Yeah, I'm going to Google it now, actually.
Thanks, Peter.
Peter, thank you. Thank you to everybody that has joined us live tonight. Thank you to, is that a Billie Jean cameo? Oh, Billie Jean. Come on then. Stamp. Do you want to do the thank yous? Will I just grab Billie Jean?
Who are we thanking, Matt?
We are definitely thanking Hannah in the chat
yeah.
for being excellent, and also Wooly, who I believe is doing a log. People love the logs and often want to know who does all the doodles. Well, it's Wooly, and it's always an exciting moment when the log pops up in WhatsApp.
Hannah has just pointed out in the chat that the Salem witch trials were in New England. I think she's absolutely right. Maybe there are Salems all over the place, like Winston-Salem. Anyway.
Now you know.
I've got Billie Jean as a diversion now, so I think Hannah will probably forgive me. Thank you all for joining us live. Thank you to Hannah for being in the chat. Thank you to everybody that's keeping the barge rocking. If you'd like to become a friend of the Tennis Podcast and get yourself on the barge in time for the US Open, then the link to do that is in our show notes. Folks, we will be back on Tuesday again. Thank you, tennis. And we'll be live at 8 p.m. on YouTube once again. And it will be available as a podcast as per usual. David will have been to Fan Week. He'll be able to tell us all about it. And we'll be able to tell you about everything that has happened in Cincinnati. Folks, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you soon.